The CEO closed a $2 billion contract and discovered he was missing the most important clause, the one about the heart. Arthur marched across the sand with the determination of someone used to crossing marble lobbies. Firm steps, upright posture, chin raised. The difference was that on marble, shoes did not sink and the wind did not throw sand in your eyes. The custom-made Italian leather Oxford shoes, crafted in Milan, sank 3 centimeters with every step. Sand crept in through the sides and settled between his toes, as if it were paying rent. The charcoal gray suit already had a sweat stain on the collar. The navy blue silk tie, the one he always chose when he needed to project, "I control everything in this room," hung limp in the heat. He saw her from a distance. A woman crouched near the water, waxing a surfboard with slow circular motions, like someone who was in no hurry whatsoever. Dark green bikini, black lycra shorts over it, brown hair tied in a loose bun that the wind kept trying to undo without success. Bare feet, no makeup, no jewelry, no sign whatsoever that this woman held veto power over a $2.4 billion deal. Arthur stopped 3 meters from her, opened the black briefcase, pulled out the contract. "Miss Dumont? My name is Arthur Brennan. I am the CEO of Brennan Capital Partners. I have a contract that needs your—" That was the exact moment it happened. A sharp screech cut through the air, a shadow dove from the blue sky. It was not a drone. It was not a passing cloud. It was Jack. Jack was a western gull of generous proportions and the attitude of someone who owns the block. The bird did not just dive. He aimed directly at the top of Arthur's head, whose styled hair gleamed in the sun like a welcome beacon. Arthur raised the executive briefcase above his head by reflex, and Jack, with the elegance of someone landing on a favorite branch, touched down with full conviction right on top of the Italian leather. Arthur froze. There he was, in the middle of a beach, holding a briefcase with a $2.4 billion contract above his head, serving as a perch for a seagull that was now cleaning its beak with the calm of someone who had reserved a table at a restaurant. But let us go back a bit, because to understand how Arthur Brennan, CEO, 42 years old, firm jaw, and a gaze that had already made 3 chief financial officers resign, ended up as a seagull perch on a sunny Tuesday in Half Moon Bay, we need to go back 5 days. Meridian Tech, a sustainable technology company that developed cutting-edge solar panels, was for sale. $2.4 billion. Arthur had spent 8 months putting the deal together. He convinced investors in New York, London, and Singapore. He built the legal structure. He aligned every comma of every clause, everything perfect, everything ready, except for the signature of H. Dumont, Helena Dumont, majority shareholder with 34% ownership and absolute veto power over any acquisition. Without her signature, the contract was expensive wallpaper, and Helena Dumont did not answer her phone, did not respond to emails, did not receive lawyers, and did not accept video conference meetings. "She is unavailable," said her assistant, a woman who spoke with the calm of someone who does yoga 6 times a week. "Miss Dumont is in her annual disconnection period. No screens, no meetings, no exceptions." "I am Arthur Brennan," he replied, as if the name were a universal access code. "I know who you are. She remains unavailable." Arthur tried for 5 days. He sent formal emails, informal ones, urgent ones, cordial ones. He had the legal director call. He had the friendliest partner at the firm call. He sent flowers, $150 worth, with a handwritten card by a professional calligrapher. The flowers came back with a note. "Lovely. But I do not change my routine for tulips. Try in person if it is that urgent." And that was how Arthur Brennan, CEO of Brennan Capital Partners, for the last 14 years responsible for moving billions across 3 continents, parked a rental car between a rusty Volkswagen van with peace and love stickers and a pickup truck with 3 surfboards on the roof, buttoned his jacket, straightened his tie, grabbed the briefcase, and walked across the sand of a beach in Half Moon Bay at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday, feeling somewhat strange, perhaps the way a penguin in the Sahara would feel. The beach was not large, about 200 meters of sand strip between 2 rocky hills. Around 20 people scattered about, board shorts, bikinis, straw hats, the kind of people who clearly did not have a board meeting at 4. 2 dogs were chasing a tennis ball. A guy was playing ukulele leaning against a palm tree. A young woman was selling acai from a cart decorated with seashells. And there was Helena. And there was the briefcase. And there was Jack. Helena stopped waxing the board, looked up, opened her mouth, and laughed. Not a polite smile, not a little courtesy chuckle. A real laugh, the kind that makes your whole body shake and that no board meeting has ever managed to provoke in anyone. "Incredible," she said, crossing her arms and admiring the scene. "That is Jack. He is extremely selective. He usually steals sandwiches from tourists, but I have never seen him accept a stranger as furniture. You have something very special in that briefcase, or maybe he likes the smell of expensive leather. Get this animal off me." Arthur hissed through his teeth, afraid to move and get pecked on the forehead. "I cannot do that, Arthur," Helena replied, going back to waxing the board with a smile he would classify as illegal in at least 3 states. "Beach rules. Jack is the house mascot. If he chose you, you are his throne now. Accept it." Arthur felt the tension rise. He managed 10,000 employees. He had closed extremely advantageous deals before breakfast. But there he was, hostage to a bird that weighed about a pound. He tried to take a step back. The Italian shoe slipped on a piece of wet seaweed. The result was a dance of arms and legs that he would never admit to having performed, balancing the briefcase, the seagull, and the last pieces of his ego in a ballet that the 20 people on the beach watched with the attention of someone watching a free comedy show. "I came here for a signature, Helena," he exclaimed, while Jack let out a victory cry directly in his ear. "Not to be bird furniture." "And I came here for a vacation, Arthur," she shot back. Her eyes turned serious for a second. "You broke the first rule of my retreat. Never bring a tie where people wear sunscreen." She stood up. She was taller than he expected, 5'9", maybe 5'10", with the straight posture of someone who has the balance of a surfer. She wiped her wax-covered hands on her shorts without any ceremony and looked at him with those brown eyes, dark, strong, completely awake, the same color as black coffee. Jack decided he had had enough fun. He spread his wings, let out a farewell screech, and took off carrying with him what remained of Arthur Brennan's executive authority. The briefcase was intact, the contract too. His dignity, not so much. Arthur lowered his arms, which were trembling from holding the weight. He straightened his tie, more out of habit than necessity. "Helena," he said, trying to restart with the "I own the world" tone he had rehearsed on the plane. But his voice came out different now. Jack had taken the tone away with him. Helena picked up the board, tucked it under her arm like someone carrying a baguette, and looked at him with an expression that mixed curiosity and amusement in the exact proportion that makes any executive uncomfortable. "I am going to make you a proposal, Arthur Brennan of Brennan Capital Partners," she said, imitating his formal tone in a way that made him realize how ridiculous he had sounded. "You invaded my vacation. My vacations are sacred. I spend 345 days a year solving other people's problems, and these 20 days are mine. Exclusively mine." Arthur stood in silence. It was rare for someone to speak to him for more than 30 seconds without him interrupting. "But," she continued, "I am fair. If you come with me today, from start to finish, without complaining, without calling anyone, without looking at your phone a single time, I will sign your contract at the end of the day." She pointed at the ocean with the board. "My office is out there." Arthur looked at the ocean. Waves about 5 feet high breaking with a regularity that he in another life would know how to calculate. The water was blue-green and the sun reflected on the surface as if someone had tossed a bucket of liquid glitter into the Pacific. He looked at his suit. He looked at her. Helena was already walking toward the water. She did not look back. She did not wait for his answer. She was absolutely certain he was going to say no. Arthur stood still on the sand. The wind threw more sand into his shoes. Jack made a flyby 3 meters from him, as if reminding him who was in charge around here. The ukulele guy started playing something that sounded vaguely like the soundtrack of a 70s surf movie. 11 seconds. Arthur counted. Later, he would not be able to explain why he counted. But he stood still for exactly 11 seconds, watching the woman who carried a surfboard toward the ocean with the same ease with which he carried briefcases toward conference rooms. On the 12th second, he took off his jacket. On the 13th, he loosened his tie. And on the 14th, Arthur Brennan, CEO, 42 years old, $2,400,000,000 on the line, folded his $3,000 jacket, placed it on top of the black briefcase, took off the destroyed Oxford shoes, and started walking toward the surf shop across the street. The acai girl looked at him and stopped stirring the cup. The ukulele guy missed a note. One of the dogs dropped the ball and just stared. And Jack landed on top of the rusty Volkswagen van, watching the scene with the satisfaction of someone who had just dethroned a king. Arthur Brennan was barefoot on a hot sidewalk, with sand between his toes and the Tuesday sun on his face. And for the first time in 14 years, he had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next. The shop was called Pacific Soul Surf and Gear, and had a cowbell hanging on the door that rang with the subtlety of a fire alarm when Arthur pushed open the glass door. The air conditioning hit his face like a cold embrace. After the sun and the sand, that artificial chill felt like the most civilized thing he had experienced in the last half hour. The floor was light wood, covered in flip-flop marks and sandy footprints. On the walls, surfboards hung at artistic angles. Short, long, colorful, white, with designs of waves, sharks, tropical flowers. On the ceiling, a decorative fishing net with fake starfish. At the counter, a young man. The young man was about 23 years old. Sun-bleached hair, tan skin, a shirt that read High Tides, Good Vibes, and a wooden bead necklace that probably cost $4 and that he wore as if it were a family heirloom. He was eating a burrito and looking at his phone when the bell rang. He looked up. Looked at Arthur. Blinked. Arthur was wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, gray tailored pants with sand up to the knee, a loose tie hanging like a surrender flag, barefoot, with his shoes in his left hand, and the expression of a man who had just made a decision and had not yet fully processed the consequences. "My man," said the young man, setting down the burrito. "Are you okay? You know this is a surf shop, not a courthouse, right?" "I need a wetsuit," said Arthur, with the same tone he used to say, "I need the third quarter projections on my desk in 10 minutes. The young man looked at him once more, from top to bottom, from bottom to top, wiped his mouth with the sleeve of his shirt. "Cool. Like, for a gift? A costume?" "For me. Now." The young man broke into a slow smile, the kind that starts at the corner of the mouth and spreads like butter melting on a pancake. "Man, this is going to be the best moment of my day." His name was Tyler. And Tyler, as Arthur would discover over the next 15 minutes, was the kind of salesperson who turned every purchase into a complete and absolutely unnecessary educational experience. "First," said Tyler, stepping out from behind the counter like a doctor beginning a consultation, "we need to understand what you want to do. What is the wave? Literally, big wave, medium wave, gentle wave. I want a wetsuit and a board. That is it. There is no that is it in surfing, partner. Surfing is a lifestyle. It is a philosophy. It is, Tyler. Yes? Wetsuit, board. I will pay whatever it costs." Tyler scratched his chin as if he were facing a quantum physics problem. "Wetsuit," he said, walking to a rack with neoprene suits hanging. "This right here is a wetsuit, 3 millimeters and 2 millimeters. The water here in Half Moon Bay is cool. Like, it seems nice for the first 5 minutes, but after half an hour without protection, your body starts complaining. You are going to want a full suit, 3-2, back zip." He pulled a black suit from the rack and held it in front of Arthur. "What is your size?" "I do not know my neoprene size." "No problem. We will go by the eyeball method." Tyler circled Arthur like a tailor in an atelier. If the tailor were wearing flip-flops and a festival shirt. "Large," he declared. "Maybe large tall. You have long legs, broad shoulders. It's going to be tight, but it has to be tight. If it is not tight, water gets in, and then it is not a wetsuit. It is an elegant garbage bag." Arthur stepped into the fitting room, a booth with a surf print curtain covered in pineapples, and began putting on the wetsuit. That was when he discovered that putting on neoprene is one of the most underrated physical activities on planet Earth. The material sticks, pulls, resists. It seems like a suit accepts your body, but a wetsuit makes you prove you deserve to wear it. Arthur pushed his right leg in. It went up to the knee without problems. From the knee up, the situation changed. The neoprene refused to pass over his thigh with the same firmness with which Helena had refused to answer the phone for 5 days. He pulled, he pushed, he twisted his hips, he bent his knee. He raised his leg as if he were trying to mount a saddle. On the other side of the curtain, Tyler heard grunting. "Everything okay in there?" "Fine," said Arthur, with the voice of someone who was clearly not fine. "If you need help." "I do not need help getting dressed." 3 minutes later, Arthur needed help getting dressed. Tyler stepped into the fitting room, grabbed the back of the wetsuit, and gave a technical pull that Arthur felt in his ribs. "There you go," said Tyler, giving him a pat on the shoulder. Born again, new surfer, impeccable look. Arthur looked at himself in the foggy mirror of the fitting room. The person looking back was not the CEO of Brennan Capital Partners. It was a 42-year-old man squeezed into black neoprene, with messy hair, barefoot, with the mark of his tie still visible on his neck like a scar from another life. The suit was folded on a wooden bench, the black briefcase on the floor. The navy blue silk tie on top, useless like the flag of a country that no longer existed. And for 1 second, quick, almost imperceptible, Arthur felt something in his stomach. It was not hunger, it was not anxiety, it was recognition. Like when you hear a song you had not listened to in 20 years and your body remembers before your mind does. He used to surf. Before college, before his master's degree at Wharton, before the internships, the spreadsheets, the late nights in offices under fluorescent lights. From 20 to 22, in the summer, he would take the van of a friend named Cooper, and they would drive to the coast. Boards on the roof, bad music on the radio, sand on the seats. They would surf until the sun disappeared and eat $3 tacos from a shack on the side of the road. He had not thought about those summers in 14 years. Now the neoprene was bringing it all back, as if the suit were a tight time machine. "Now the board," said Tyler, guiding him to the back of the shop. "For you, I recommend a longboard, a big board, 9 feet, stable, forgiving, like a friendly grandmother. Works for me." Tyler pulled a white surfboard with a blue stripe from the rack. "This one right here is the Gentle Giant. Hard foam, fixed fin, gentle rocker. Perfect for someone who is coming back." Arthur held the board. It was heavier than he remembered. Or maybe he was weaker, or older, or both. "Anything else?" asked Tyler. "Leash, wax, backup rash guard, everything." Tyler added it all up in his head. $742. With the long-sleeve rash guard and the artisanal wax pack. He paused. "Which is basically wax that smells like coconut." Arthur pulled a credit card from the pocket of his folded dress pants. Tyler looked at the card. It was black. No limit. The kind of card Tyler had probably only seen in movies. "Man," Tyler said, swiping the card on the machine. "I do not know what is going on in your life, but I am rooting for you." Arthur grabbed the board under his arm. The leash coiled around his wrist, the bag with the rest hanging from his shoulder. He pushed the door open with his hip. The cowbell rang again. Outside, the sun hit his face and the sand immediately attacked his wet feet. He crossed the street, past the Volkswagen van with peace stickers, past the ukulele guy, who was now playing another song but stopped when he saw him, past the acai girl, who this time did not stop stirring the cup, but raised her eyebrows until her forehead disappeared under her hat. Arthur planted the longboard in the sand, looked at the ocean. Helena was out there. Sitting on her board, floating beyond the break, her feet dangling in the water, gazing at the horizon like someone who had no deadline anywhere in the world. Arthur took a deep breath. The last time he had held a surfboard, he was 22 years old. He fit into any wetsuit without needing help. He had no employees. He had no shares. He had nobody waiting for any decision from him. He had a friend named Cooper, an old van, and all the time in the world. Now he was 42 years old, had $2,400,000,000 on the line, sand in the most unlikely parts of his body, and a woman in the middle of the ocean who was absolutely certain he was not coming. He tucked the board under his arm, strapped the leash to his ankle, and walked to the water. The first wave hit his knees. The North Pacific has this way about it. It is not hostile, but it does not pretend to be a heated pool either. The coolness rose through the neoprene like a polite reminder that out here, the ocean was in charge. Arthur kept walking. Helena, out in the calm water, turned her head. She saw the white longboard with the blue stripe. She saw the wetsuit. She saw Arthur Brennan paddling toward her with the rusty technique of someone who had not paddled in 20 years, but with the determination of someone who had signed contracts with 3 countries in one afternoon. She stopped, dangling her feet in the water. She crossed her arms over the board. And for the first time since he arrived at that beach, Helena Dumont was genuinely unsure of what to expect. The Pacific Ocean does not care about your job title. Arthur discovered this in the first 90 seconds. He paddled the longboard to where Helena was, a stretch of maybe 70 meters that took triple the time it should have, because his paddling technique had 20 years of rust. And the Pacific is not the kind of ocean that offers discounts to beginners. Each stroke sent a splash that hit his face. The cold water seeped through the gaps of the wetsuit in areas where the neoprene did not seal perfectly: wrists, ankles, the back of the neck, and each infiltration was like a pinch from nature itself, saying, "Welcome back, friend." By the time he finally reached Helena, he was out of breath. She looked at him with the expression of a teacher who saw the wrong student walk into the right classroom. "You know how to surf," she said. It was not a question. It was an accusation. Arthur, still catching his breath, tried to look casual. "I used to surf about 20 years ago." 15 years, Helena repeated as if she were calculating the depreciation. "So basically you are a beginner with a veteran's ego. The most dangerous combination in the ocean. I prefer professional under reconstruction. The ocean prefers easy target." The first wave came 6 minutes later, a clean set about 5 feet, breaking with a regularity that Arthur, in some dusty corner of his memory, recognized as ideal for longboarding. Helena went first. She paddled 3 strokes, stood up with a fluidity that seemed choreographed, and glided along the wall of the wave as if the board were an extension of her body. No visible effort, no correction. Not a single gesture that did not need to be there. Arthur watched from the calm water floating on the longboard and felt 2 things simultaneously: genuine admiration and absolute panic. The next wave was his. He turned the longboard toward the beach, paddled, felt the wave lift the tail of the board, that push the ocean gives when it decides you are going along, whether you like it or not. He placed his hands on the board to do the pop-up, the move of getting up and standing. His brain knew how to do it. His arms remembered. His legs did not get the memo. They were in a meeting with his knees, and nobody had made any decision. His left foot slipped. His right knee hit the board. His center of gravity, which in theory should have stayed low and centered, decided to migrate somewhere above his left shoulder. Arthur toppled to the side like a tree being cut in slow motion and fell into the water with a sound that was neither a splash nor a splat, but something in between. A wet sound completely devoid of any dignity. The wave rolled over him. Underwater, with his mouth full of salt and his eyes burning, Arthur had a moment of absolute clarity. The ocean had just gotten even for 20 years of abandonment. He surfaced coughing. The longboard was 5 meters away, pulled by the leash stretching from his ankle like a collar. He pulled the board back, climbed on again, paddled back to position. Helena, who had paddled back out after her wave, was sitting on her board looking at him with her arms crossed. "The good news," she said, "is that the water here is only about 6 feet deep. And the bad news? I saw everything." Second attempt. Smaller wave, slower, theoretically easier. Arthur paddled, felt the push, planted his hands, drove his body upward. This time his feet found the board. Both of them, at the same time. He stood for exactly 1.5 seconds, long enough to feel the board gliding and the wind on his face, before realizing his feet were too close together, his knees locked, and his body rigid as a museum statue on a skateboard. The board shot out from under him like a rug pulled by a particularly cruel magician. Arthur fell on his back. The back of his head hit the water first. The impact did not hurt. The wetsuit absorbed some of it, but the wave that came next rolled him like a washing machine on heavy cycle. When he surfaced, he was facing the wrong direction. The leash wrapped around his knee, and a piece of seaweed hanging from his shoulder, like a military decoration awarded by the Pacific. Helena said nothing this time, but Arthur saw through the salt water in his eyes that she was biting her lip. Hard. Third attempt. Arthur paddled more calmly. waited for the right wave, not the biggest, not the smallest, the one in the middle. Felt the push, did the pop-up. This time, he spread his feet apart, bent his knees, lowered his center of gravity. He stood up. 2 seconds. 3. The board glided, his arms open to the sides, not with elegance, more like a tightrope walker on the wire with a fear of heights. His body swayed, his knees trembled. He shifted his weight to his back foot. The board responded. The wave carried him about 30 feet before losing strength and dying in the foam. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. He looked like a scarecrow trying to waltz on top of a wet plank. But he stood up, and when the wave died and he fell into the shallow water with a controlled splash, something happened that Arthur Brennan did not expect. He laughed. Not the social laugh he used at business dinners. Not the polite laugh of someone who had just heard the board chairman's joke for the 4th time. It was a belly laugh. Loose. Loud. The kind of laugh that comes from a place that stays locked most of the time, and that when it opens, everything comes out at once. Clumsy, noisy, and completely out of control. Arthur was on his knees in the shallow water, with foam up to his waist, the board floating beside him, his hair stuck to his forehead, salt in his eyes, seaweed on his shoulder, and laughing like he had not laughed since. He could not remember. He genuinely could not remember. Helena, sitting on her board about 100 feet away, heard the laugh over the sound of the sea, and something changed on her face. The amusement was still there, the irony too, but something else appeared, subtle, almost invisible, like a thin cloud passing in front of the sun. Curiosity. The real kind. The kind that makes a person tilt their head half a centimeter to the side without realizing it. She tilted. Arthur paddled back, this time with more rhythm, his body beginning to remember how it fits into the movement of the water. He reached her and sat on the longboard, his legs dangling on each side, catching his breath. 15 years, said Helena. 15 years, he confirmed. And what happened? In the 20 years? Arthur looked at her, then at the horizon. The line where the sky meets the sea was so sharp it looked like it had been drawn with a ruler. College, MBA, company, meetings. More meetings. Business dinners at restaurants where the waiter explains the dish for 5 minutes and the food fits on a dessert spoon. Plane trips where I fell asleep before takeoff and woke up at the gate. Offices with a view of Central Park that I never looked at because I was looking at the screen. He paused. Life happened. The version I thought was the right one. Helena did not respond right away. She swung her feet in the water. The sound was soft, rhythmic. Splish, splish, splish. Do you know what the sea does to things that stay still too long? She said finally. What? It covers them in barnacles, like those incrustations on the hulls of old boats. Layer by layer. The original thing is still underneath, but nobody can see it anymore. Arthur looked at his own hands, fingers that signed billion-dollar contracts, that typed emails at 3 a.m, that held champagne glasses at events he did not want to be at. Now they were wrinkled from the water, with dried salt on the cuticles, and a slight sunburn starting on the back. I had a friend named Cooper, said Arthur, not knowing exactly why he was sharing this. We used to surf every summer. He had a van. We would drive to the coast, sleep in the parking lot, surf all day. And Cooper? I do not know. I lost touch when I went to college. He stayed on the coast. I went to Philadelphia. Philadelphia, Helena repeated, as if the word had a taste. Wharton. And at Wharton, do they teach you how to surf? Arthur laughed. Again, this time softer, shorter, but still genuine. At Wharton they teach you that time is money. And is it? The question hung floating between the two of them, like the spray of a wave that breaks and dissolves in the air. Arthur did not answer. Not because he did not want to, because he did not know the answer. And that, not knowing, was perhaps the most uncomfortable thing he had felt that entire day. More than the tight neoprene, more than the wipeout, more than the salt in his eyes. Helena looked at him for 2 more seconds. Then she turned her board toward the horizon. Come on. The next set is coming. And this time, try not to look like a lamppost trying to balance on a bar of soap. Arthur turned the longboard, paddled after her. The waves were growing on the horizon like mountains in slow motion, and for the first time that afternoon, he was not thinking about the contract. He was not thinking about anything. He was just paddling. Between one set of waves and the next, The Pacific goes silent. It is not the silence of an air-conditioned office, that fake silence, full of keyboards and whispers. It is a real silence, made of water breathing. Arthur and Helena were sitting on the longboards, side by side, floating in the calm water beyond the break. Their feet dangled in the dark water. The Tuesday sun had already passed its highest point and was slowly descending, stretching the shadows of the waves as if someone were pulling a blanket over the sea. Arthur had caught 4 more waves since the first one. He fell on 2. He stood up on 2. The ratio was improving. The muscle memory was coming back in pieces. First the feet, then the knees, then the hips. The arms still seemed to belong to someone else, someone who was not sure what to do with them, but the progress was visible. Helena had surfed every wave with the same annoyingly smooth fluidity as always. No falls, no sudden corrections, without even looking like she was trying. She surfed the way some people breathe, naturally without thinking, as if the body knew how to do it before it was even born. Now the two of them floated, waiting. "Can I ask you a question?" said Helena, looking at the horizon. "You are going to ask regardless of my answer." "True. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" Arthur opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The funny part, or maybe the sad part, is that it was not a hard question to understand. It was hard to answer. Because the answer required digging through recent memory and finding a moment, a single moment, when Arthur Brennan had done something without a strategic purpose, without an expected return, without an agenda. Buying the apartment in Manhattan, investment. The dinner at the 3-Michelin-starred Japanese restaurant last month, meeting with a fund from Tokyo. The vacation in Aspen in the winter, networking with a group of investors who skied together every year. His silence lasted 7 seconds. Helena did not fill it. She let the silence exist, swinging her feet in the water as if time were something she had in unlimited supply. "I bought a painting," said Arthur finally. "About 2 years ago. A painting. Oil on canvas. By an artist I had never heard of. I was walking through Chelsea on a Saturday and the gallery was open and the painting was on the wall and I just liked it. I bought it on the spot." "And what did you do with it?" "I hung it in the office." "In the office?" "Yes. You bought a painting for pleasure and hung it in the place where you work." Arthur realized the irony 6 seconds after Helena did. She did not need to say anything more. The sentence hung between the two of them like a wave that never quite breaks. "Your turn," said Arthur. "Can I ask a question?" "It depends." "Depends on what?" "If the question is about the contract, the answer is, at the end of the day. If it is about me, it depends on whether I feel like answering." "Why are you here? On this beach, at this moment, instead of in a boardroom deciding the fate of $2 billion. Helena stopped swinging her feet. She looked at him. Those black coffee eyes. "Because I have already been in the boardroom," she said. "I know every inch of those mahogany tables. I know how the coffee at the 8 o'clock meetings tastes different from the coffee at the 3 o'clock meetings. I know how the light changes in 20th floor offices between winter and summer. I know the smell of a new suit and the texture of every type of contract paper." She paused, looked at the sea. "And the view from there is not worth it." Arthur stayed silent. "Meridian was my family's company." Helena continued without him asking. "My father founded the company in his garage in Portland when I was 6 years old. Solar panels. Back then everyone thought he was crazy. Solar energy in Oregon, the state that gets rain 220 days a year?" She imitated a deep nasal voice, but he persisted. 20 years later, Meridian was in 17 states and 3 countries. "And he retired?" "He passed away 4 years ago." The sentence came without extra weight, without drama, without sad background music. Helena said it like someone stating a fact. Painful, yes, but already digested, already incorporated, already transformed into part of the structure. Arthur did not say "I am sorry." He almost did. The phrase was in line, ready, automatic, the kind of response that came out of him at corporate events when someone mentioned a loss. But something stopped him. Maybe because he felt that Helena did not want condolences. She wanted to be heard. So he listened. "I ran the company for 2 years, she continued. I kept everything running. I expanded to 2 more states. I negotiated with the Department of Energy in Washington. I slept at the office more times than I would like to admit. And on a Tuesday, she smiled. On a Tuesday exactly like this one, I was sitting in the boardroom on the 22nd floor with the most expensive view in Portland in front of me, and I realized I had not looked out the window in weeks. The most expensive view in the state, and I did not even know if it was raining outside. And what did you do? I hired a professional CEO. I delegated the operation. I kept my shares, and I went back to living. She made a wide gesture with her arms, including the sea, the sky, the board, the sun, the sand, far away. This is my office now, 20 days a year, no exceptions, no negotiation, no emails. Arthur looked around. Her office had no walls, no ceiling, no mahogany desk. It had salt water, an infinite horizon line, and a surfboard as an executive chair. And the other 345 days? He asked. I climb, I bike, I dive, I trail run in the mountains. I do remote work for Meridian when I need to. I read, I cook. Sometimes I do nothing. And doing nothing is much harder than it seems when you have spent your entire life doing everything. Arthur thought about the last time he did nothing. He thought for 10 seconds. He gave up. There was no last time. Doing nothing was not in his vocabulary. Every minute had a purpose. Every hour had a return. His schedule was an engineering masterpiece of efficiency, where even sleep was optimized with apps that monitored rest cycles. Are you afraid to stop? Helena asked, with the ease of someone asking if it is going to rain. I am not afraid to stop. No? I simply do not stop. That is the same thing, Arthur. The sentence hit him like a wave that comes from behind, the kind you do not see coming because you're looking at the horizon. He felt the impact, processed the meaning, and was left without a response for the third time that afternoon. Helena noticed. She did not push. Look, she said, pointing at the horizon. A new set was forming. 4 waves lined up, growing slowly, each one a little bigger than the one before, like notes ascending a musical scale. That one is for you, said Helena. The third, not the first, not the second. The third. There is a longer gap before it, gives you time to get in position. How do you know? Because I have been reading waves for 20 years. Now go. Arthur turned the longboard, paddled into position, let the first wave pass underneath, felt the lift, the temptation to go, and resisted. Let the second pass. On the third, he paddled with everything he had, felt the push, did the pop-up. This time was different. His feet found the board in the right spot. His knees bent the right amount. His weight dropped to the back foot the way it should. The board glided along the face of the wave, and Arthur was standing, stable, arms still open, but now with a purpose. Balancing, correcting, adjusting. They were not scarecrow arms. They were the arms of someone who was remembering how it is done. The wave carried him for about 60 feet. 60 feet of water sliding beneath his feet, of wind on his face, of a sound that is part roar, part whisper. At the end, when the wave lost strength, he did not fall. He stepped off the board by choice, jumping into the shallow water and grabbing the edge of the longboard with his left hand. He stood still, the water lapping at his shins, the foam receding around his feet. Something in his chest was opening up. It was not the laughter from before. It was something that came before the laughter. Something that existed beneath all the layers of contracts, meetings, quarterly goals, and conference calls at 6 in the morning. Something that was 22 years old and smelled like salt and board wax. Helena paddled up close to him. She stopped her board in the foam. Not bad, she said, for a guy with 20 years of rust. Do you know what is strange? Arthur said, looking at the ocean he had just surfed. What? I forgot how much I liked this. It is not that I stopped and remembered and missed it. I forgot. Completely, as if that part of my life had been deleted. Helena did not respond with words. She gave a light tap on his board with the palm of her hand, a gesture that could mean, I understand, or it will get better, or simply, I am here. Arthur did not know which of the three. Maybe all three. The sun continued going down, the waves continued coming, and the two of them continued surfing, falling, laughing, floating in the calm between sets, exchanging sentences that came and went like the tide itself, sometimes long and deep, sometimes short and fun, sometimes just shared silence that did not need to be filled. And at no point, none, did Arthur look at his watch. The sun had turned orange, not the shy orange of the beginning of a sunset, that polite orange that shows up for 10 minutes and leaves. It was the obscene, exaggerated orange of a late afternoon on the Pacific, the kind that paints the entire sky as if someone had spilled watercolor paint into the atmosphere and did not regret it one bit. Arthur and Helena were in the calm water. They had lost count of the waves. By Arthur's internal clock, the only clock he had, since the Rolex was inside his Oxford shoe on the sand, they had been in the water for about 3 hours. Maybe more. The concept of time had dissolved in the salt along with the gel that had held his hair that morning. The afternoon waves were different, longer, slower, more generous. The kind of wave that arrives without hurry, lifts the surfer gently, and carries them for a long time before dying softly in the foam. Longboard waves. End-of-day waves. Helena was looking at the horizon with that half-smile Arthur was starting to recognize. It meant she was thinking about something that was probably going to cause problems for him. "I have an idea," she said. "Your ideas so far have involved putting me in the ocean, in a wetsuit on a workday. Should I be worried?" "Probably." She pointed at his longboard. 9 feet of hard foam, wide enough for 2. Both of us. Same board. "I am going to leave mine on the sand and come right back." Arthur looked at the board, looked at her, looked at the sea, looked back at the board. She swam back to him. "Are you serious?" "Completely. Tandem surfing. Have you ever heard of it?" "I have heard of things that seem good in theory and end in disaster in practice. Marriage, for example. Family businesses. Diets in January. That kind of thing." Helena laughed. A short, surprised laugh, the kind that escapes before the person decides whether they found it funny or not. "The principle is simple," she said, ignoring the comparison. "I stay at the front, you stay in the back. You paddle because you have more weight and arm power. When the wave catches us, both of us stand up at the same time. The secret is timing. If one goes before the other, they both fall." Sounds like a metaphor for something. "It is a surfboard, Arthur. Not everything needs to be a metaphor." They paddled together to position. Helena lay down at the front of the longboard, Arthur in the back. The board sank a little more with the weight of both. The balance was different, more sensitive. Every movement from one affected the other. "When I say now, you paddle with everything you have," Helena instructed. "And when I stand up, you stand up 2 seconds later, not before. If you stand up first, you throw the weight forward and the board nosedives." "Got it. You first." "Me second. 2 seconds. Exactly. It is like a contract." She looked back with that smile. "You have to read the clauses in the right order." The first wave came. "Now." Arthur paddled. The wave lifted the board. Helena did the pop-up, fluid, fast. Arthur counted 1, 2, and stood up. The problem was that standing up and standing up in the right spot are 2 different things when there's another person on the board. His left foot landed 2 centimeters farther forward than it should have. The weight shifted. The nose of the board dove like a determined submarine. Helena felt the nose sinking and tried to compensate by throwing her body backward, but Helena's body going backward met Arthur's chest coming forward, and the 2 of them collided in the middle of the board like 2 pedestrians turning the same corner in opposite directions. The board catapulted both of them to the left. Arthur fell first. Helena fell on top of him. The wave rolled over both of them with the indifference of someone who has more important things to do. Underwater, for half a second, Arthur felt her elbow in his rib, his knee somewhere he could not identify, and the longboard spinning around like an out-of-control top tethered by the leash. They surfaced coughing. "What was that?" Helena spit out salt water. "I think I stood up too early." "You think?" 2 seconds is too fast. I need 2.5. You negotiate even in the ocean? 2 seconds is not negotiable. It is physics. Center of gravity, weight distribution, angular momentum. You are giving a mechanical engineering lecture in the middle of the ocean. Someone has to. Second attempt. This time Arthur waited the full 2 seconds. He counted out loud, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and stood up. His feet found the board. He was standing. Helena was already at the front, stable. For 1 second, it worked. Then Arthur made the classic mistake of someone who has never done tandem. He looked down. He looked at his feet. The instant his eyes left the horizon and focused on the board, his balance left like a startled cat, silent, fast, and with no intention of coming back. He wobbled. Tried to correct. Overcorrected. The board tilted to the right. Helena felt the tilt and tried to compensate, but physics is democratic. It does not matter how good a surfer you are. If the 200-pound guy behind you decides to fall to the right, you are going with him. They both fell. Again, this time separately. Helena to the left, Arthur to the right, the board shooting up like a foam rocket. Helena surfaced, pushed the hair from her face, and looked at him with an expression that mixed patience and disbelief. You look down. I know. Do not look down. I know. Look at the horizon. Always. The horizon does not move. Your feet figure it out on their own. You are incredibly calm for someone who was just catapulted by a 200-pound CEO. 194. She corrected automatically, and Arthur realized she had been paying more attention to him than he thought. Third attempt. Arthur did not look down. He did not count out loud. He did not think about physics, engineering, metaphors, or contracts. He simply waited for Helena to stand up, breathed, and stood up. He was on his feet for 4 seconds, long enough to feel the board gliding, to see Helena's back at the front with her arms open like wings, to hear the sound of water splitting beneath the foam. Then the wave changed angle. The board lost speed on one side, and the loss of balance was slow. So slow it seemed intentional, like a bow at the end of a show that did not quite work out. They both fell, this time slowly, almost gracefully. Getting better, said Helena, surfacing. Less violent. I am evolving from catastrophic disaster to acceptable disaster. Next time, try for charming disaster. Arthur laughed. She did too. They floated for a minute, catching their breath. The sun was lower now. The golden light made the water look like molten metal. The waves arrived with a slow and perfect cadence, as if the ocean knew they had one more attempt and was preparing the right wave. One more? Helena asked. One more. They paddled together to position, Helena in front, Arthur in back. This time nobody spoke. Nobody gave instructions. Nobody counted Mississippis. They simply lay on the board, feeling the sea rise and fall beneath them like the breathing of something much larger than both of them, and waited. The wave came. It was not the biggest of the day, not the fastest. It was a medium wave, honest, without pretension. The kind of wave that does not try to impress. It just does what waves do. Arthur paddled. The board accelerated. The wave lifted both of them. Helena stood up, one movement, clean, as if she were rising from a chair. Arthur breathed. He did not count. He did not look down. He stood up. His feet found the board. His knees bent. His weight landed in the right spot. And both of them were standing. The board glided along the face of the wave. The water, golden from the sun, passed beneath them like a river of light. Helena was at the front with her arms slightly open, her bare feet firm on the foam, her entire body aligned with the movement of the wave, as if she had been born there. Arthur was in the back, knees bent, hands loose at his sides, his gaze fixed on the horizon. On the horizon, not on his feet. And for 6 seconds, neither of them breathed. 6 seconds. It is not much time for a contract. It is not much time for a meeting. It is not much time for a conference call. But on top of a surfboard, with the sun painting the world golden and another person sharing the balance with you, 6 seconds is a lifetime. The wave lost strength. The board slowed down. They both lost their balance at the same instant, she forward, he backward, and fell into the shallow water with a splash that sent foam in every direction. The water was about knee-deep, warm, golden. Helena surfaced first, hair stuck to her face, water dripping, laughing. Arthur surfaced 2 seconds later, salt in his eyes, foam in his mouth, laughing. The two of them stayed there on their knees in the shallow water, with the board floating between them, laughing in a way that had nothing to do with jokes, business, strategy, or money. It was the laughter of two people who had just done something together, and it worked. Messy, wet, loud, completely imperfect, and precisely because of that, perfect. Helena splashed water at him with her hand. He splashed back. She splashed again. He tried to dodge, lost his balance, and sat in the water with his backside on the sandy bottom. She doubled over laughing. 6 seconds, said Arthur, when the laughter gave a truce. 6, she confirmed. Worth every fall. Helena looked at him. The sun was behind her head, turning her wet hair into a frame of light. She said nothing. She just looked. And in that look there was something Arthur could not name. It was not admiration. It was not attraction. It was not respect. It was something that came before all of that. It was recognition. The kind that happens when one person looks at another and thinks, without words, "You are real." The sun touched the line of the horizon. The longest and shortest Tuesday of Arthur Brennan's life was coming to an end. Two bodies sitting on the sand, wet wetsuit, hair stuck flat, dried salt on the corners of the face. If someone had taken a photo of them at that moment and showed it to anyone on Wall Street, nobody, absolutely nobody, would have identified Arthur Brennan. They were sitting where the dry sand meets the wet sand, on that border strip where the last foam of the waves dies and retreats, the longboards stuck in the sand behind them like totems. The sun was a finger away from the horizon, that exact moment when the light becomes so horizontal that shadows stretch to infinity and everything looks like it has been painted in oil. Helena had her knees pulled up against her chest, her arms crossed around her shins. Arthur had his legs stretched out, his feet buried in the wet sand, his hands propped behind his body. Neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people have spent enough time together that they do not need to fill every second with words. "Your contract," said Helena, breaking the silence with the casualness of someone asking for the menu. Arthur blinked. He had forgotten. For at least a full hour, he had forgotten the contract. $2,400,000,000, and he had simply forgotten. He stood up, walked to where the black briefcase was, miraculously intact on the sand, next to the Oxford shoes that would probably never be the same, and brought it back. Opened the briefcase, took out the contract, the pen clipped to the inside pocket. Helena took the papers. She read them. Not skimming, she really read. Every page. With that calm attention she applied to everything, as if reading a contract were as natural as reading the sea. Arthur watched. He saw her eyes moving across the lines, stopping at specific clauses, going back a page to check a reference. She read fast, but she did not skim. This impressed him more than it should have. He was used to people who signed contracts trusting the lawyers, not their own eyes. 2 minutes. Helena reached the last page. She looked at the pen Arthur was holding. "Nice pen," she said. "Mont Blanc?" "Yes, at least the pen knows how to swim." Helena took the pen, signed on the dotted line. A firm signature, tilted to the right, without flourishes. H. Dumont. 7 letters that represented 34% of a $2,400,000,000 company. She returned the pen and the contract. Arthur put them in the briefcase, closed the clasp. The metallic click sounded final, like a judge's gavel. It was done. 8 months of negotiation. 5 days of unanswered phone calls, 1 flight, a neoprene suit, 3 hours in the ocean, a shared surfboard. And now, right there on the sand, with the sun touching the horizon, the thing was done. Arthur should have been celebrating. He should have felt that rush he always felt when a deal closed. The adrenaline, the satisfaction, the confirmation that he was the best at what he did. He should have been mentally calculating the return on investment, the stock valuation, the headline that would come out in the Wall Street Journal the following week. He felt none of that. He felt salt on his skin, exhaustion in his shoulders, sand in places he would rather not mention, and a strange thing in his stomach that was not hunger or nausea. It was more like the feeling you get when you are leaving a place and you realize you left something behind, but you do not know what. "Thank you," he said. The words came out smaller than he intended. Helena looked at him. Up close now with the sunset light, her eyes were not just brown. They had veins of amber that appeared when the light came in at the right angle. Arthur noticed this and immediately felt annoyed with himself for noticing. "For what?" she asked. "For the signature." "Oh, that, and for the rest, for the day." Helena kept looking at him for 3 seconds, 3 seconds that Arthur felt in his spine. "You surprised me," she said. "I set that condition expecting you to leave, to go back to the car, call the lawyer, and try another strategy. And if I had left, I would have signed it anyway, tomorrow, by mail, no drama." Arthur processed the information. That entire day, the waves, the falls, the shared surfboard, the conversations in the sea, all because she wanted to see if he was capable of stepping out of character. "So it was a test," he said with a half smile that tried to be light but could not completely hide the weight underneath. "It was not a test. It was a curiosity. I wanted to know if behind the suit there was a person." There was. The sentence stayed on the sand between them, like a footprint the tide had not yet erased. Arthur stood up. He shook the sand off the wetsuit. A useless gesture, because sand on a wet wetsuit does not come off with shaking. It clings with the loyalty of a longtime employee. He picked up the briefcase, looked at the shoes, looked at Helena. "I have to go," he said. Helena nodded. She did not say stay. She did not say wait. She said nothing that asked him to stay. She respected choices, hers and others, with the same steadiness with which she surfed. "Safe travels," she said. Arthur started walking, bare feet on the sand, briefcase in his right hand, shoes in his left, the wetsuit still wet, dripping a trail on the sand that the breeze would dry in minutes. He walked 10 steps before looking back. Helena was still sitting in the same position, knees bent, arms crossed around her shins, watching the sun that was now halfway gone, cut by the horizon like a split orange. She did not look at him, not because she did not want to, because that was his moment, his decision, and she was not the kind of woman who interfered with other people's decisions. Arthur turned forward and kept walking. He passed the assai girl, who was already closing up her cart. He passed the empty spot where the ukulele guy had been. He passed the Volkswagen van with peace and love stickers. On its roof, Jack was perched, the same seagull, the same orange beak, but this time the bird did not dive, did not screech, did not try to use anyone as furniture. It just sat there, its head turned to the side, one round black eye watching Arthur pass. Almost as if it recognized that the man in the wet wetsuit carrying a surfboard was no longer the same person who had arrived in a suit holding a briefcase 6 hours ago. Arthur looked at the bird. The bird looked at him. Neither of them did anything, and that, somehow, was enough. He reached the rental car, opened the trunk, put the board in. The board he had rented 3 hours ago, as if it were office supplies, and that now represented something he did not have the vocabulary to define. He needed to return it to the shop before heading to the airport. He sat in the driver's seat. The wet wetsuit soaked the leather upholstery. He did not care. He started the car. The road back was a coastal highway, the kind that winds between the sea and the hills, with curves that reveal the ocean and curves that hide it. The sun was gone, but the sky was still painted, purple, pink, faded orange, as if nature were making the scene change slowly without hurry, knowing that nobody was going to rush it. Arthur drove in silence, no radio, no podcast, no conference call on Bluetooth. The black briefcase was on the passenger seat, closed, containing the contract signed by Helena Dumont. $2.4 billion in potential. The biggest closing of Brennan Capital Partners. The kind of document that changed careers, made headlines, and was framed and hung in law firm offices as a trophy. Arthur looked at the briefcase. He looked at the road. He looked at the briefcase again. His fingers still had dried salt on the cuticles. The tips of his hair were still stiff from the sea. The wetsuit stuck to his back. And in the palm of his right hand, the hand holding the steering wheel, he could still feel the ghost of the board wax. That gritty texture that stays on the skin for hours. $2.4 billion in the passenger seat. And for the first time in the professional life of Arthur Brennan, in his entire career, in 14 years of contracts, acquisitions, mergers, restructurings, initial public offerings, and negotiations on 3 continents, he looked at that number and thought, so what? Not with anger. Not with contempt. With something worse, with indifference. With the cold sensation that that contract, those billions, all that financial architecture he had spent 8 months building, was paper. Paper with clauses, paper with signatures, paper that the market would celebrate tomorrow and forget the following week. While 6 seconds on a surfboard with another person, with the golden sun and the salt in his mouth, he would remember for the rest of his life. The highway made a long curve that revealed the ocean down below. Dark now. Almost black. The waves were white lines in the darkness, ghosts of all the waves he did not surf in the last 20 years. Arthur gripped the steering wheel. Is money the only thing of value in life? The question came without warning, like the waves that break from behind. It was not a philosophical question from a self-help book. It was raw, concrete, The question of a 42-year-old man who spent 14 years building something that today, in this car on this road, with this salt on his skin, seemed less valuable than a Tuesday afternoon with a stranger in the sea. He did not answer. He did not have the answer. But the question stayed. It took the back seat. It sat there, silent, watching him through the rearview mirror, like a passenger who did not ask for a ride, but had absolutely no intention of getting out. And miles behind, on the beach that was getting smaller and smaller in the mirror, Helena Dumont was still sitting on the sand, watching the last colors of the sky fade away. She did not call him. She did not send a message. She did not try to stop him. But when the first star appeared, she thought, in a low voice, to nobody, to the sea. I never imagined a CEO could laugh like that. She stayed looking at the star. Then she stood up, picked up the board, and walked barefoot across the dark sand toward home. The sea continued. The waves kept breaking. And somewhere on Highway 1, between Half Moon Bay and San Francisco, a wet man in a rental car was driving with a $2 billion document in the passenger seat and a void the size of the Pacific in his chest. The next morning, Brennan Capital Partners felt like a surgery room minutes before the operation. Everyone in position, tense, focused, waiting for the result that would define the rest of the year. Arthur arrived at 7:22. New suit, charcoal gray, no sand. New shoes, not the Milan Oxfords, which would probably never be the same. New tie, navy blue, the same color, as if yesterday's tie had not served as a cleaning cloth for sand-covered lenses. Hair combed. Face shaved, no visible trace of the previous Tuesday. Except the eyes. The eyes were different. But nobody in that room paid attention to Arthur Brennan's eyes. They paid attention to his hands. And in his hands was the black briefcase. He entered the boardroom, the mahogany table, the leather chairs, the presentation screen. The 6 partners, the 4 lawyers from the firm Whitmore, Kessler & Pierce. The chief financial officer, Diana Torres, who had dark circles from 3 nights of reviewing projections. And at the head of the table, as always, Richard and Margaret Hayes, the 2 board members who represented the largest block of investors at Brennan Capital. Arthur placed the briefcase on the table, opened it, took out the contract, placed it in front of everyone with the same ease with which Helena had placed the surfboard on the sand. "It is signed," he said. 2 seconds of silence. Then the silence exploded. Richard Hayes was the first to react. He jumped out of his chair as if he had been shocked, grabbed the contract, looked at the signature, and made a sound somewhere between a shout and a sob. Diana Torres took off her glasses, wiped them with the sleeve of her blazer, put them back on, and reread the signature 3 times as if it might disappear. Margaret Hayes simply nodded with a discreet smile. The kind of smile of someone who has seen empires being built and knew how to recognize the exact moment another one was taking shape. The Whitmore lawyers began checking the clauses with the speed of someone reading election results. "How?" asked David Park, managing partner, with the expression of someone who had internally bet that Arthur would come back empty-handed. "Nobody could even talk to this woman. 5 days. We tried for 5 days." "How did you get the signature in 1 afternoon?" Arthur opened his mouth, closed it, smiled. In-person persuasion. Nobody asked for details. At Brennan Capital, results did not need explanations. You deliver or you do not. Arthur delivered. The champagne appeared 15 minutes later. Not supermarket champagne, the Veuve Clicquot that Richard kept in his office mini-fridge for historic occasions. Glasses were distributed. Richard made a toast. The words were the usual ones: visionary, dedication, leadership, historic milestone. The same adjectives that appeared in all the toasts at all the closings, interchangeable like Lego pieces. Arthur raised his glass, smiled, toasted. The champagne touched his lips, and it had no taste. It was not the champagne, it was him. The drink was cold, bubbly, exactly the way it should have been. But Arthur's mouth, the same mouth that the previous afternoon had swallowed half a liter of salt water from the Pacific, did not register pleasure, did not register celebration. It registered bubbles. Just bubbles. He drank half the glass, smiled more, shook hands, received pats on the back, heard Diana say the stock value was going to soar, heard David calculate the bonuses, heard Richard call the financial newspaper to coordinate the announcement. Everything was working. The corporate machine was turning. And Arthur was at the center of it, doing exactly what he had been doing for 14 years, smiling, shaking hands, validating numbers. At 11:40, the room emptied. One by one, people left, for calls, for meetings, for press releases. Richard was the last to leave. At the door, he turned and pointed at Arthur with his index finger. "Man, you are a machine. 2,400,000,000. On the beach. Unbelievable." He left. The door closed with a soft click. Arthur was alone. The boardroom of Brennan Capital Partners was on the 38th floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan. The windows went from floor to ceiling. Tempered glass, frameless. The kind of glass that cost a fortune and gave the impression that there was no barrier between the room and the city outside. From that floor, you could see all of Central Park. The trees, the lake, the buildings of the Upper West Side, the sky. Arthur never looked. In 14 years in that office, he could count on one hand the times he had stopped in front of the window just to look. The view was scenery, decoration, a benefit listed in the lease contract that justified the price per square foot. Today he stopped. He walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the cold glass. The city stretched below him like a board game. Cars, taxis, ant-sized people, all moving with an urgency that, seen from 38 floors up, seemed absurd. Everyone going somewhere. Nobody stopped, nobody looking at the sky. Arthur looked at the sky. It was gray. The gray of New York in March. An institutional, corporate gray. The kind of gray that matches suits and boardrooms. No resemblance to the obscene blue of the sky over Half Moon Bay. No resemblance to the orange of yesterday's sunset. None. He looked at his hands, the same hands that 12 hours ago had held a surfboard, paddled in the Pacific, applauded waves that only he and Helena had witnessed, and between the index finger and thumb of his right hand, at the junction where the skin folds when the fingers meet, there was salt, dried salt. From the sea, from the afternoon before. Arthur brought his hand to his face. He smelled it, and the office disappeared. Not literally. The walls were still there, the mahogany table, the chairs, the half-empty champagne glass, everything in place. But for 3 seconds, that cost more than all the champagne in that room, Arthur was not on the 38th floor of Manhattan. He was in the Pacific, sitting on a longboard with his feet in the cold water, with Helena beside him saying something about barnacles and old boats, with the sun melting on the horizon, with that laugh, that loose belly laugh that had come out of him as if it had been locked away for 14 years and had finally found the door open. 3 seconds. Then the air conditioning blew, the smell of the sea vanished, and he was back. 38th floor. Charcoal gray suit, new shoes, tasteless champagne on the table. Arthur stood in front of the window for 5 more minutes. He did not think about anything specific, or maybe he thought about everything at once. The contract, Helena, the waves, the surfboard, the question that still lived in the back seat of the rental car he had already returned. Is money the only thing of value? Down below, 38 floors below, the city continued. Taxis honked, people walked fast, phone screens glowed, everyone in a hurry, everyone with a destination, everyone with their own version of 2,400,000,000, maybe smaller, maybe bigger, guiding every step. Arthur stepped away from the window, went back to the table, picked up the champagne glass, looked at the golden liquid. The bubbles rose in vertical lines, predictable, organized, exactly like his life for the last 14 years. He set the glass back on the table. Without drinking, he sat in the leather chair. The leather creaked the same way it had creaked for years. Everything was the same. The office, the city, the title, the money, everything in exactly the same place. But something had changed. Not in the room. In him. It was as if the tide had come in through some crack and carried away something he did not even know was there. Or maybe it had brought something in. A memory, a flavor, a laugh he had borrowed from his own past and that now refused to be returned. Arthur opened the laptop. The inbox had 147 new emails, meetings scheduled for 2, 3:30, and 5. A video conference with Singapore at 7 in the evening. The day was completely filled, every block of time colored and labeled on the calendar like the squares of a quilt stitched together without room to breathe. He looked at the screen. He looked at the window. He looked at the hand where the salt still remained, and he closed the laptop. Not with anger, not with dramatic resolve. He closed it with the gentleness of someone closing a book they are reading who needs a moment before turning the page. The champagne stayed on the table. The bubbles kept rising. The office kept running. And Arthur Brennan stayed seated in the leather chair, eyes closed, forehead resting on his interlocked fingers, smelling the ghost of the salt the sea had left on his skin. Money was not the only thing of value. He still did not know what else was. But he knew the answer was not in that office. And that, for now, was enough to keep him from sleeping well for many nights. 2 weeks. 14 days. 336 hours, if you are the type who counts. And Arthur Brennan was exactly the type who counts. In the first 3 days he tried to ignore it. He went back to his routine like someone putting on a suit that had shrunk in the wash. The suit was the same. The body was the one that seemed different. Meetings at 8. Business lunch at noon. Calls with investors in the afternoon. Dinner with clients at night. The schedule was the same. The pace was the same. The numbers on the screens were the same. But the windows seemed smaller. They were not. Arthur checked. Same size as always, same tempered glass, same view of Central Park. But now, every time he looked out the window, and he was looking much more than before, the view seemed confined, framed, like a landscape photograph hung on the wall of a hospital. On the 4th day, he delegated the 8 o'clock meeting to Diana. First time in 14 years he missed the 8 o'clock meeting without being sick or on a plane. On the 6th day, he left the office at 5:15. Richard saw him in the elevator and made a face as if he had spotted a rare natural phenomenon. "You are leaving?" asked Richard. "Now? It is 5 o'clock. 5:15, Arthur corrected, as if the extra 15 minutes justified anything. "Are you okay?" "I am great." Arthur was not great. Arthur was in that particular state of restlessness that happens when something inside you has rearranged itself, and the outside has not caught up yet. Like an apartment renovated on the inside that still has the old facade, everything looks the same from outside, but anyone who walks in knows the rooms have moved. On the 7th day, he bought a wetsuit online, 32mm, full suit, front zip, the same model Tyler had shown him, but now in the right size. He practiced putting it on 3 times in the Manhattan apartment with talcum powder on his legs, following a YouTube video with 47 views hosted by a 20-year-old Swede who put on neoprene with the ease of someone putting on a t-shirt. On the 9th day at 8 in the evening, 5 in the afternoon in California, the last minute before the shop closed, he called Pacific Soul Surf and Gear. Tyler answered on the 2nd ring. "Pacific Soul, this is Tyler. What can I—" "Tyler, it is Arthur, the suit guy." Half a second of silence. Then the smile was audible through the phone. "My man, the Barefoot CEO. Dude, I was waiting for this call. I knew it was gonna happen. I had a bet with myself. I bet you would call in 2 weeks. I won by 3 days. I need the same board. The Gentle Giant, 9'2". Hold it for me. Bro, the board is already here. Never left the rack. I even waxed it last night because, I do not know, something told me you were coming back." Arthur was silent for 2 seconds. Then he said, "Thank you, Tyler." Hey, are you getting emotional? The guy who closed $1 billion contract on the beach is getting sentimental about a surfboard? Man, I love this phase. Arthur hung up. He opened the airline app before he even put the phone down. First flight the next morning, Kennedy to San Francisco, 5:40 in the morning. He rented a car at the airport. Quick, practical. He was still a CEO. He thought in terms of efficiency even when the destination was a beach. But the anticipation that kept him up that night was not about business. It was about the tide. The following morning dawned gray in Half Moon Bay. Not the gray of New York, a maritime gray, alive, smelling of salt, and with the constant sound of the ocean underneath everything like a bass line in a song. Arthur stopped at Pacific Soul around 9:30. Tyler was opening the shop. He saw Arthur in cargo shorts, white t-shirt, flip-flops with a wetsuit bag over his shoulder, and broke into the same slow smile from 2 weeks ago. "My man. You're back? The board?" "Right there. Ready. Fresh wax. Like I said." Arthur picked up the board, settled the day's rental, and left. The cowbell rang. He walked across the sand, the wetsuit already on, this time without help, with the technique he had practiced in the apartment during the week. The beach was quiet. Middle of the week, no tourists. A few surfers already in the water, black dots on the gray line of the sea. The Akai girl had not arrived. The ukulele guy was not there. And Helena was not there either. Arthur stopped in the same spot where she had been waxing her board 2 weeks ago. The sand was the same, the sea was the same, the smell was the same, but the place was empty the way a stage is empty when the show ends and the lights go out. Everything in place but missing the essential. He looked around. Maybe she was farther away. Maybe in the water. Maybe the kiosk. A wooden kiosk painted faded blue that sold coffee, sandwiches, and local information. The owner was a man of about 60 years old, white hair, a coffee-stained apron, with the geological calm of someone who has lived on the same beach for decades. "Excuse me," said Arthur. "Do you know a woman named Helena?" "Helena Dumont? Surfer. Brown hair. She usually stays around this area." The man looked at him with the expression of someone deciding whether that was an innocent question or a sign of trouble. "Helena?" he said, scratching his chin. "Of course. Everyone here knows her. She comes every year. 3 weeks, always the same time, but her vacation ended. She left last week. She left. Packed up on Tuesday. I know because she lent her board to a young man who was learning. Then she left, without saying where she was going, as always, when she never says where she is going." Arthur stood there with the board under his arm. The wind kicked up sand around his feet. The sea kept breaking. The surfers kept surfing. Everything continued. "Thank you," said Arthur. He walked to the edge of the water, strapped the leash to his ankle, looked at the sea. It was the same sea, the same waves, the same horizon. He went in. The cool water rose through the wetsuit like a familiar greeting. His feet found the rocks on the bottom, then the submerged sand, then nothing. Just water. He lay on the board, paddled. His arms worked with more fluidity than 2 weeks ago. The muscle memory had come back a little more, like a rusty door that keeps giving way the more you push. He made it past the break, sat on the board in the calm water, his feet in the dark water. He stayed there. The first set arrived. Arthur turned the board, paddled, caught the second wave. The pop-up came naturally, feet in place, knees bent, weight centered. He glided along the face of the wave for about 50 feet. He felt the wind, he felt the salt, he felt the board alive beneath his feet. It was good. Really good. He caught 5 more waves in the next hour. He fell on one, a controlled fall, almost elegant, the kind that experienced surfers call a clean wipeout. On the other 4, he stood up. One of them he surfed almost all the way to the sand. The progress was real. The body was relearning. The sea was accepting him back. But between one wave and the next, sitting on the board in the calm water, Arthur looked to the side and the side was empty. There was nobody saying, "Do not look down." There was nobody imitating nasal voices of men who had doubted her father. There was nobody with black, coffee eyes and a smile that disarmed billion-dollar contracts. The sea was good. The surf was good. The day was good. But it was not the same thing. Arthur surfed until noon. He came out of the water with aching shoulders and wrinkled fingers. He sat on the sand in the same spot as always. He ate a sandwich from the kiosk. The owner brought a coffee without being asked, a flap of wings. Familiar. Jack landed on the sand half a meter from him. No dive, no screech, no drama. The seagull simply folded its wings, adjusted its feathers, and stayed there, looking at the sea with the same posture of someone sitting on a park bench. Arthur looked at the bird. The bird looked at him. Neither of them moved. Arthur tore off a piece of bread from the sandwich and placed it on the sand between them. Jack looked at the bread, looked at Arthur, ate the bread, and stayed. The two of them sat there, looking at the sea, while the coffee grew cold. A CEO and a seagull. If someone had taken a photo, they would not be able to tell which of the two looked more at home on that beach. "She is like that," said the man, without Arthur asking anything. "She comes and goes, like the tide. Nobody holds on to Helena." Arthur drank the coffee, bitter, strong, with a vague taste of salt that could have been from the sea or from his hands. He looked at the sea one last time. Then he stood up, picked up the board, and walked back to Pacific Soul. Tyler was behind the counter when Arthur returned the board. He looked at him for 2 seconds. The kind of look that reads what the mouth does not say. "You did not come for the waves, did you?" Arthur did not answer. Tyler put the board back on the rack, ran his hand over the wax as if he were smoothing the fur of an animal, and said without looking at him, "Good luck out there, bro." On the road back to the airport, he drove in silence. On the plane, window seat, Arthur watched the clouds. White, organized, indifferent. He had not come back for the signature. He had not come back for the contract. He had not come back for the surf, although the surf was part of it. He had come back for her. And she was not there. And now he was going to have to figure out what to do with that information. With that void that was not about the contract, not about the work, not about the money. It was a void with a shape, with the smell of board wax, with the sound of a laugh in the shallow water, with the specific weight of 6 seconds on top of a shared surfboard. The plane landed at JFK at 10 at night. Arthur took a taxi. He arrived at the apartment on Park Avenue. The apartment was enormous, over 3,000 square feet, view of Central Park, decorated by a designer who cost the equivalent of an imported car. Empty, not of furniture, of everything else. 1 month after the day at the beach, Arthur Brennan did something he had not done in 14 years. He canceled a meeting because he did not want to go. Not because he was sick. Not because he had something more important. Because he did not want to. Period. The meeting was with an investment fund from Chicago that wanted to discuss a strategic partnership. Important? Yes. Profitable? Probably. But when Arthur looked at his schedule that Thursday morning and saw the 2-hour block painted in corporate blue between 10 and 12, something inside him, something that had never had a voice before, said, no. He sent an email to Diana. Delegate the Chicago meeting. Whatever decision you make, I support it. Diana responded in 4 seconds. Who are you? What have you done with Arthur Brennan? And can I keep this version? It was a joke. But it was not just a joke. In the 30 days since Half Moon Bay, Arthur had changed in ways that the people around him could not name, but noticed. He left the office before 7, sometimes before 6. Twice he left at 5. Richard stopped asking if he was okay. He had given up trying to understand. He canceled the monthly dinner with the Singapore investors. He delegated 3 negotiations he would normally handle personally. He stopped answering emails between midnight and 6 in the morning. A habit he had maintained for so long that Diana thought he had a robot. And he started running. Not on a gym treadmill with a built-in television screen and a wrist heart rate monitor. On the street. In Central Park. 6 in the morning, when the park was still gray and quiet, with early morning chess players and ladies walking their dogs. Arthur ran without headphones, without a performance app, without a pace goal. He ran to feel the air in his lungs and the ground beneath his feet. He ran so he would not think. It worked. For about 40 minutes. Then the thought came back. The thing was Helena. And it was not Helena. It was what Helena represented. It was the version of himself that had appeared on that beach. The guy who laughed loud, who fell in the ocean and got back up, who could sit in silence without discomfort, who listened without preparing his response while the other person was talking. That guy did not exist in Manhattan. He did not fit on the 38th floor. He did not go with $3,000 suits, but he existed. And now that Arthur knew he existed, he could no longer pretend he did not. On a Saturday, 6 weeks after the beach, he walked into a bicycle shop in Soho. Not the hipster shop that sold fixed-gear bikes to 25-year-old designers. A serious shop with carbon fiber mountain bikes and trail riding equipment. The salesperson, a woman in her early 30s with the arms of someone who pedaled more than she sold, asked what he was looking for. A mountain bike. For trails. What kind of trail? Cross-country? Enduro? Downhill? I do not know the difference. She looked at him with the same expression Tyler had made in Half Moon Bay. The universal expression of the specialized salesperson who realizes the customer has more money than knowledge. Let us start from the beginning, she said. Arthur left the shop 2 hours later with a Santa Cruz Hightower made of carbon fiber, a helmet, gloves, clip-in cycling shoes, protective glasses, and a hydration pack he did not know how to use. The total bill made the surf shop salesman look cheap. The problem, the first of many, was the clip-in shoes. A clip-in cycling shoe is a cycling shoe that locks into the bicycle pedal through a mechanical system. The advantage, pedaling efficiency. The disadvantage, if you do not unclip the shoe before you stop, The bicycle stops and you go with it. To the ground. Like a tree. Arthur discovered this in the shop's parking lot. He pedaled 10 meters, stopped, forgot to twist his heel. The shoe did not release. The bicycle leaned to the left. Arthur leaned to the left. The ground approached with the inevitability of a due date. He fell sideways, with the bicycle attached to his foot in the middle of the parking lot, in slow motion, with the dignity of a penguin on ice skates. The salesperson came running out of the shop. "Are you okay?" "I am," said Arthur. From the ground, with the bicycle on top of his leg. "Does this happen to everyone?" "To everyone, without exception. We call it the first kiss with the asphalt." Arthur got up, dusted himself off, pedaled another 10 meters, stopped. This time he remembered to twist his heel. The shoe released. His foot found the ground. He did not fall. Progress. In the following weeks, Arthur transferred his operations to the West Coast. Not officially, Brennan Capital was still based in Manhattan. But he started working remotely from a rented apartment in San Francisco, flying to New York only when it was strictly necessary. Diana, who was now basically the one running things day to day, accepted without question. Richard questioned, was ignored, and eventually accepted too. The weekends belonged to the bicycle. Arthur discovered the trails of Marin County, north of San Francisco, Mount Tamalpais, Muir Woods, China Camp, trails that climbed through redwood forests, passed overlooks with views of the Pacific, descended through single tracks full of roots and rocks. He pedaled alone. He climbed slowly. His lungs burned, his legs protested, his heart hammered in his chest like a door being pounded on. But at the top, when he stopped to breathe and looked at the world down below, he felt something that no spreadsheet, no contract, no champagne toast had ever produced. Silence. The kind that cleanses. He fell 6 times in the first month. Twice from the clip-in shoes. Once on a route he did not see, another on a loose dirt turn, the other 2 from overconfidence, which in mountain biking is basically the equivalent of a CEO thinking he can surf without practice. He scraped the skin off his left elbow, earned a purple bruise on his right thigh that lasted 2 weeks, and broke the bike's rearview mirror in a sideways fall he swore nobody saw. But a squirrel on the branch above witnessed the whole thing. Despite the falls, he went back. He always went back. Because at the top of the mountains, with the wind on his face and his legs shaking from the effort, Arthur found something he had lost in Manhattan. The feeling of being alive without needing a financial reason for it. On a Sunday in March, 8 weeks after the beach, Arthur decided to try a new trail, Mount Diablo, east of San Francisco. A friend of Diana's from work, whom he had never met, had mentioned that the overlook at the top had one of the most incredible views in Northern California. Arthur set the GPS, drove 40 minutes, parked, and started climbing. The trail was brutal. Constant uphill for almost 7 miles. Hot sun for March, crosswind that pushed the bicycle on the exposed sections. Arthur stopped 3 times to drink water. His quadriceps begged for mercy at mile 4. He ignored them. At mile 6, the trail opened to an overlook, and the view hit him like a wave. The entire valley stretched out below, miles of green cut by silver rivers, dotted with trees that looked like pins on a giant quilt. On the horizon, the golden haze of the March sun covered everything like a veil. The hills rolled as far as the eye could see, layer behind layer, each one lighter than the one before, until they vanished into the pale blue of the sky. Arthur stopped, got off the bicycle, leaned it against a rock. He stood there on his feet, with his legs trembling from the effort and his chest rising and falling, looking at something that no office in the world could frame. And that was when he saw her. Sitting on a rock at the edge of the overlook, with a mountain bike leaning beside her and a water bottle in her hand, looking at the valley in absolute silence, as if she were reading a book only she could see, was Helena Dumas. The brown hair was tied in a loose bun. The tanned skin of someone who lives outdoors. Cycling clothes, vibrant pink lycra, turquoise blue jersey with a chest zipper. Cycling shoes, sunglasses hanging from the collar. No suit. No briefcase. No contract. She had not seen him yet. Arthur stood still, the bicycle leaning against the rock, his heart beating. And now it was not just from the effort of the climb. It was a different beat. A beat that had a name, but that he would not admit out loud even if someone paid $2,400,000,000. He took a step, The gravel under his clip-in shoe made a dry sound. Helena turned her head. Their eyes met. 1 second. 2. 3. And then, as if it were the most natural and most absurd thing in the world at the same time, they both started to laugh. The laughter lasted longer than any productive meeting Arthur had ever had. It was not the polite laugh of someone running into a colleague. It was a belly laugh, the kind that starts in the mouth, drops to the stomach, folds the body in half, and makes the eyes water. The kind of laugh that comes when the coincidence is so absurd, so improbable, so cosmically ridiculous, that the only possible reaction is to laugh until it hurts. Helena was laughing with her hand on her forehead, eyes closed, shaking her head like someone who had given up trying to understand. Arthur was laughing bent over his knees, with his breathing broken by the 7-mile climb that was now competing with the breathlessness of the laughter. "Of all the overlooks," said Helena, when she managed to speak, "of all the overlooks in Northern California, all the trails, all the possible Sundays in the year." "You think I followed you," said Arthur. "I think the universe has a very specific sense of humor, or a terrible sense of direction." Helena laughed again, shorter, warmer. Arthur walked to the rock where she was sitting. He did not ask permission. He did not ask if he could sit. He sat beside her with the ease of someone sitting in their usual spot, as if that rock on top of Mount Diablo were the sandbar where they had talked between waves, only at 3,000 feet of altitude and without the salt. His feet dangled over the edge. The rock sat at the rim of the overlook, with a gentle drop of about 6 feet to a slope covered in brush. Down below, the valley stretched out like a green carpet with wrinkles of hills and stitches of rivers. "You are different," said Helena, looking at him sideways. "Different how?" "No suit. I also wear normal clothes, occasionally." It was not just the suit. She made a vague gesture with her hand, pointing at all of him. "You are looser, less tight. I bought clip-in shoes. I fell 6 times in the first month. I broke the bike's rearview mirror. I think the ground taught me how to relax." Helena smiled. Not the smile of amusement. The smile of recognition. The smile of someone who looks at another person and sees something they have already seen in themselves. "When did you start riding?" she asked. "About 4 weeks ago." "Before or after you showed up at the beach?" Arthur turned his face, looked at her. "You know I came back?" "Jim told me. The kiosk owner. He sent me a message. Your friend in the suit came here with a surfboard looking for you. He looked like a dog that lost its owner." "He said that?" "Word for word. Jim has a gift for poetic brevity." Arthur laughed, and in the laugh there was a hint of something. It was not shame, it was not embarrassment, it was vulnerability. The vulnerability of knowing that someone saw you searching and not finding. "I came back with the wetsuit," he said. "I bought it in Manhattan, on a random night, like it was a secret operation. I caught the first flight the next morning. Tyler held a board for me at the shop." "Tyler?" Helena repeated, with the tone of someone recognizing the name of an ally. "He is a good guy. He sent me a message too." "The suit guy came back, Lena. I think you did some damage. Apparently everyone in Half Moon Bay has your number. It is a small beach. Everyone knows everyone. And nobody has anything better to do than watch strangers in wetsuits." The wind from the valley rose through the overlook. Warm, different from the ocean wind. A dry wind, smelling of brush and sun-heated earth. Helena closed her eyes for a second, letting the wind pass across her face. Arthur watched. He did not hide that he was watching. That was a difference. The Arthur from the beach would have looked away. The Arthur at the overlook did not look away. "I almost left a note," said Helena, with her eyes closed. "A note?" She opened her eyes, looked at the valley. "When I left Half Moon Bay, on Tuesday, I was packing and I thought about leaving a note at Jim's kiosk, in case you showed up. Some form of contact, a number, an email, something." The word almost hung in the air between the two of them like a wave that rises but does not break. "And why did you not leave it?" Arthur asked. The question came out with more weight than he intended. Helena took a while to answer. Not because she did not know, because she was choosing her words with the same care she used to choose waves. "Because I did not want to be the person who waits," she said. "I spent my whole life deciding where to go and when. If I left a note, I would be waiting. And waiting is the thing I do worst in the world." Arthur understood. He understood in a way that caught him by surprise, because it was exactly what he would do. He did not wait either. He acted, he solved. He took the plane, went to the beach. Waiting was not in his vocabulary. They were alike, not in the obvious ways, him from the office, her from the surfboard, but in the structure, in the way they moved through the world, in the inability to stand still waiting for things to happen. "And now?" said Arthur. "Now we are sitting on top of a mountain." "I know what you meant," she cut in gently. "And the answer is, I do not know. I know how to surf, ride, climb, dive, run trails, and read contracts in 2 minutes. But I do not know how to answer, and now, when the question involves another person." Arthur stayed silent. The valley down below kept existing regardless of the two of them. The trees kept going. The rivers kept going. The sun kept dropping. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "You can." When I went back to the office with the signed contract, everyone celebrated. Champagne, applause, $2,400,000,000, the biggest closing in the company's history. And the champagne had no taste. Helena turned her face and looked at him, up close. The brown eyes with veins of amber, the face of someone who lives outdoors, no makeup, no filter, with the marks of the sun and the wind as a signature. "Go on," she said. "I stayed alone in the office after the celebration, 38th floor. View of Central Park. And I felt that view was not the view I wanted. The view I wanted was a horizon line in the middle of the ocean, with someone beside me saying not to look down." Helena did not respond right away. Not because she had nothing to say, because what he said carried weight. It carried weight in the right way, not like a rehearsed declaration, but like a raw admission from someone who does not usually admit raw things. "You know what is funny?" she said, her voice lower. "That night after you left the beach, I sat on the sand and waited for the first star. And I thought, I never imagined a CEO could laugh like that. That belly laugh you let out when you stood up for the first time." "I did not imagine it either," said Arthur. "I had forgotten I knew how to laugh like that." The sun was lower now. The light changed. It became warmer, denser, the kind of light that photographers call golden hour and that normal people call that beautiful moment before it gets dark. The shadows in the valley grew longer. The hills gained sharper contours. Helena stretched her legs on the rock, took a sip of water, offered the bottle to Arthur. He accepted. "Tell me," she said. "You went in a suit to the beach, then in a wetsuit to the beach, now in lycra to the mountain. What is the next step? Am I going to find you climbing El Capitan in a suit?" Arthur almost choked on the water. "I do not know how to climb. Yet? If you learn to surf again in 1 afternoon and to ride in a month, climbing is a matter of time. I am 42 years old, and I just discovered that my legs have their own opinion about clip-in shoes." "Excuse that I wear," Helena said, stretching her foot to show her cycling shoe. "Exactly the same clip-in system. I also fell the first few times." "How many times?" "1. I am more coordinated than you. Accept it." Arthur looked at her. She looked at him, and the two of them laughed again, this time softer, more intimate, the laugh of two people who discovered that they enjoy laughing together. The valley down below grew darker. The sun touched the hills on the horizon. The golden light gathered at the edge of the world, as if it were saying goodbye slowly. "I have an idea," said Arthur. "The last time someone said that to me, it was me saying it to you, and it involved surfing on the same board. This one is simpler. The descent, together. The trail continues in a loop for another 4 miles. Single track. Going down is the best part." Helena looked at the trail, looked at her bike, looked at him. "Can you handle 4 miles of descent on single track with 4 weeks of experience? Probably not. But I also probably could not handle surfing in Half Moon Bay with 20 years out of practice, and look where we are." Helena was silent for 2 seconds. Then she stood up from the rock, brushed the dust off her lycra, grabbed her bike, and spun the helmet in her hand. "Try to keep up," she said, and she started pedaling. Helena pedaled in front as if the mountain were hers. And maybe it was. The descent trail was single track, narrow as a hallway, winding as a river, with sharp turns that appeared behind trees like ill-intentioned surprises. The ground was compacted earth, exposed roots, loose rocks, and stretches of gravel that made the rear tire dance if you did not control your weight. Helena flowed through all of it with the same irritating naturalness with which she surfed. Body low, elbows open, hips loose, eyes on the trail 10 feet ahead. Her bicycle seemed like an extension of her body. Where she went, the bike followed. Where the bike turned, she had already turned before. Arthur pedaled behind, not with the same fluidity, not with the same confidence, but he pedaled. And for a guy with 4 weeks of mountain biking and a recent history of 6 falls, he was doing better than any statistic would suggest. The trail descended through redwoods that filtered the sun into diagonal beams of golden light. The air smelled of damp earth and dry leaves. The sound was only the tires on the dirt, the wind in their ears, and every now and then Arthur's heavy breathing that Helena could probably hear from 150 feet away. On a wide turn, Helena braked and waited. Arthur arrived about 10 seconds later, braking with more enthusiasm than technique. "You are alive," she said. "Surprisingly, there is a more open section up ahead, fewer routes. We can ride side by side." "Side by side? It is more fun when you can talk." The trail opened into a flat stretch between 2 hills. Smooth dirt, no obstacles, wide enough for 2 bicycles. Helena slowed down. Arthur pulled alongside, and for the first time since they started descending, the 2 of them pedaled together, side by side, at the same speed, like 2 boats sailing in the same channel. "Can I tell you something strange?" said Arthur, pedaling. "Stranger than a Manhattan CEO finding the same woman at the top of a mountain in California by chance on a random Sunday? Comparable. Go ahead. I have a friend, Cooper, the van and surf guy I told you about in the ocean. I remember, the one who did not show up. I looked him up this week, searched online, not to talk business or ask for anything, just to find out what happened to him. And he lives in Santa Cruz. He has a surfboard workshop, makes custom boards, handcrafted. His website has a photo in front of the shop, him, his wife, and 2 dogs. Long hair, beard, flip-flops. The same face from 22, just older. Does he look happy?" "He looks like the most peaceful person I have ever seen in my life." Helena pedaled in silence for a few yards. "And that bothered you," she said. "It was not a question. It did not bother me. It made me think. We were both 22 and had the same waves. He stayed on the coast, and I went to Philadelphia. He chose the surfboard, and I chose the spreadsheet. And 20 years later, I have 20 years of closed contracts, and he has a workshop with 2 dogs. And which of the 2 made the right choice?" Arthur braked slightly. The bicycle slowed down. "That is the question that will not let me sleep." Helena braked too. The 2 of them stopped in the middle of the trail. The sun was behind the hills now, not completely, but almost, sending horizontal rays that turned the trail dust into floating particles of gold. The light was so beautiful it looked edited. But it was not. "You know what I think?" said Helena, resting her foot on the ground. "I think there is no right choice. There is the choice you made and what you do with it afterward. You chose the spreadsheet, and now you are choosing the surfboard. Both things can be true at the same time. I am not good at living with 2 truths at the same time. Nobody is. But you learn. Just like learning to surf. You fall a few times, take a few beatings from the ocean, and one day you stand up and stay on your feet." Arthur looked at her. The golden light was doing the things that golden light does, softening edges, warming colors, turning normal moments into moments that stay engraved. But it was not the light that made that moment different. It was her. It was the way she was there. Stopped on the trail, with one foot on the ground and the other on the pedal, with her helmet slightly crooked, and a smudge of dirt on her left arm, and those eyes that looked at him as if he were a person and not a title. "Yes? I do not know how to do this." "Do what?" "This thing that is happening. I do not know how to do it. I know how to close contracts. I know how to negotiate in 3 languages. I know how to read a 50-page spreadsheet and find the error on line 37. But I do not know how to say what I want to say without turning it into a business proposal." Helena tilted her head 1/2 centimeter to the side, the same gesture she made at the beach when she heard him laugh for the first time. "Then do not turn it into one," she said. "Talk like a person." Arthur breathed. The mountain air entered his lungs, clean, without air conditioning, without filters, without the metallic taste of the office. It came out slowly. "In that contract," said Arthur, I forgot to read the most important clause, the one that says success is worth nothing if you have no one to share the view with. He looked at the valley. The golden haze covered everything. Then he looked at her. If you will allow it, he said, with the simplest voice he had ever used in his life, I want to join you on your adventures. All of them, forever. The silence that followed was the longest and shortest silence Arthur had ever lived. Longest because every second weighed like an hour. Shortest because he knew, deep down in that place that exists before logic and after intuition, that the answer was on her face before her mouth. Helena looked at him. She took her time. 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. The brown eyes with veins of amber, the tanned skin, the smudge of dirt on her arm, the crooked helmet, the calm breathing of someone who lives at the rhythm of nature and not of the markets. She smiled. It was not the ironic smile from the beach. It was not the amused smile from the surf shop. It was not the smile of recognition from the overlook. It was a new smile. The kind that is born slowly, takes over the entire face, and reaches the eyes before it reaches the lips. Yes, she said. 1 word, 3 letters. No contract, no witnesses, no clauses. Arthur let out the air he did not know he was holding. And he laughed, a low laugh, almost whispered, of pure relief. The laugh of someone who had just discovered that the answer that mattered most in life did not need 8 months of negotiation. Helena extended her hand, not for a formal handshake, for a touch. Her fingers found his fingers, dirty with earth, marked by gloves, with cuticles worn from the ride, and stayed there. But I have one condition, she said. Arthur raised his eyebrow. You cannot take me to business dinners. Done. And I am not wearing a business suit. I do not plan on wearing a suit anytime soon either. And every 2 weeks at least, we do something that neither of us knows how to do, something new. Arthur looked at her, at the trail, at the golden valley down below. At the bicycle he barely knew how to ride, and that was now, somehow, the best thing he had ever bought in his life. Done, he repeated. Helena let go of his hand, put her foot on the pedal, adjusted the helmet that was still crooked. Last descent before dark, she said. Try to keep up, you already said that, and I am going to keep saying it. She pedaled. Arthur pedaled behind. Then beside her. The two of them descended the trail together, through trees, roots, turns, rocks, and beams of light that were going out one by one as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. There was no champagne. There was no audience. There were no camera flashes from photographers. There was no conference room with tempered glass and a view of Central Park. There was no screen projecting quarterly results. There was the sound of tires on the dirt, the wind in the trees, the smell of redwood and sweat. And 2 people who finally understood that the best deal in life is not closed in a conference room. It is closed on a surfboard in the ocean, on a rock at the top of a mountain, or on a single-track trail with the daylight fading and the adventure just beginning. Arthur Brennan, CEO of Brennan Capital Partners, 42 years old, responsible for contracts that move billions, pedaled the last turn of the trail and almost fell. The clip-in shoe locked. The bicycle leaned. He twisted his heel at the last second and planted his foot on the ground with a dry sound. Helena looked back. You okay? Fine. Almost fell again? Almost. You will get better. I know, I have a good teacher. Helena shook her head, smiling. She pedaled slowly. Arthur pulled alongside, and the 2 of them descended the mountain together while the entire sky painted itself purple, and the first stars appeared. The same stars that had appeared over Half Moon Bay on the night Arthur left, and Helena stayed on the sand. But this time, nobody left. This time the 2 of them were pedaling in the same direction. And the trail continued. The end.